Hello, my friends. Katie Day with the Movement to Texas team. We are here with another episode of the Real Advice Podcast. I am excited for this week's guest, team leader, mom, wife, realtor, broker extraordinaire, all of the things. Excited to dig in with Mary Murphy of the Murphy Group out of New Jersey. What's going on, Mary? How are you?
I'm excited to be here. Not much. Just setting up for our Monday. So we're good.
Nice. Good deal. So for those that may not know you, Mary, how did you get into real estate?
So honestly, the real story is I was teaching. I was teaching special needs pre-K and I was making nothing. And by the time I put 2 kids in daycare and drove over the bridge to Philadelphia every day, it just wasn't worth, and I was so stressed out. It was a really difficult job.
Yeah.
When I really ran the numbers, I was like, I went to my husband, who was the breadwinner at the time. My money really wasn't that important. I was like, well, I don't want to do this anymore. So when I had to go back after maternity leave for my second kid in May, after I finished out that school year, I had made the decision I wasn't going back. So I figured I would just sell something. I'd bartended before. I loved
Yeah.
that. I'm like, I'll just sell something and make up that $1,000 a month or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so I picked houses because they were the most expensive thing. And that was pretty much kind of how it happened.
Yeah.
I went on to remax.com and I clicked careers, and then a recruiter called me. The next day I'm sitting down with some broker who really couldn't give me the time of day. Like, he was kind of like, you're probably not going to make it. Most agents don't, and you're a teacher. So if you want to join me, I can show you the way, but
Yeah.
you're probably not going to make any money. You're not going to make it. So I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to join that guy.
Great positive start. Okay.
Yeah. So that was kind of the first step. And he ended up actually directing me to where I went to real estate school. So he did help me.
Yeah.
And then he directed me to Keller Williams. He said, go get trained.
Yep.
And then come to Remax. So that was like my first experience. And I was like, okay, I guess that's what I'll do. And then I did a ton of research. So I really did, though. That was it. But then also, like, I don't really do things halfway. I thought I was going to do it part-time. And my husband, who was doing well, he had the full-time job. Well, when I finished real estate school, they eliminated his role and he got laid off. So I went from this job that was going to be part-time to it actually needing to be something.
Yeah.
Which was okay, because I was super pumped. By the time I had finished real estate school and watched every YouTube video and read every book I could find, I was ready to like kind of hit the ground running. So, that was the beginning.
It's interesting that broker said that to you. Because one, I do think that it's like, you do need to give some, realistic expectations. Like, this isn't HGTV. Like, yeah, obviously, like, homes are expensive, but like, you also have to realize that homes are expensive. So like, you've got to like be all in and do all the things. But like, I think teachers have some of the best background for real estate agents, because like, you have the patience, you're able to like break things down in a really like great way and things like that. And so some of like the most successful agents I know had background in education. So whatever to that broker. But
it's funny because I heard a similar message a lot throughout that first year from different brokers and veteran agents. And you realize that's an older model where it cost him money to bring me on.
True.
So he wasn't going to bring me on, I guess, if he didn't think I would actually be worth his time.
Yeah.
So, and I'm probably paraphrasing because I sat with him for probably, an hour or 45 minutes, but that's pretty much what his message was. But yeah, it's crazy because it is a lot of work. It's not easy.
Yeah.
But I mean, I sold 37 houses that year.
You're like, gotcha.
I know he's like not even a broker anymore. He works for like HomeSmart. Every once in a while, I want to like reach out and let him know, but I have
see how he's doing. So what advice would you give to someone just starting out? You said that you did like a ton of research. You were like, watching YouTube videos. You were doing your own like kind of training and stuff like that. Like, if I was brand new today, just got my license and I had hung it at, ABC Realty, right? Like, what would you tell me to do to be successful?
I would tell you to do your research. I would tell you to meet with certain people. And I can think of the mentors I had in the beginning. And I joke about those couple people who were kind of negative, but I didn't surround myself with them. So I would really focus on who you're going to join and what you're looking to put into it, and then know that you are putting something into it. So, I researched a lot about Keller Williams. He was the one who mentioned it to me. I had never heard of them. So this is 2015.
Okay.
I'd never heard of them. No, it's 2014 because I got licensed in
And
15.
then
This
yeah,
is
okay.
before I got licensed. So, they had just opened that office in that town that I went and joined. So, yeah, I would just say do your research and be willing to take control of your education. No one cares if you make it or make it in this industry, unfortunately. It's all up to you until you find people who then want to help you. And there's so many of us, you know. So that was really it. And I I just started coaching and training right away. And I
Yeah.
actually joined a team. I did.
Okay.
I joined a team after 6 weeks.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, and so, I mean, so you had the conversations in 14, you got licensed in 15, and then you started your team in 2018, right? So that was a pretty quick, pathway to
So
get
I
started,
joined teams
right?
first, and
Okay.
I think that, coming from being a teacher or maybe just being really self-aware
Yeah.
and reflective, I realized when I really got to learn this real estate career and knowing how successful I had to be quickly, I was like, "All right, that's a lot of stuff to learn."
Yeah.
Right? That's a lot to do, that's a lot to learn, that's a lot of hats. So, how can I just learn the language of sales? How can I just learn how to convert? How can I have opportunities and then
Yeah.
not worry about contracts, not worry about all that? Not even not worry about it, but not I didn't think I could learn this whole thing all at once.
Yeah.
And I was right. So I started looking for teams and I was the first one in the office every day. So I really was. The broker would walk in after me. And I took Bold. If you guys don't know what Bold is, that's like this boot camp type class. 2 weeks license. I'm in this room and they're like, okay, this is what you do. You prospect in the morning,
Yeah.
appointments are in the afternoon, follow up is after that. I didn't know the bad habits. I literally thought everyone did it that way.
And then you
So
get further and further into real estate. You're like, no one does this, but like this is the
no.
stuff you need to do to be successful.
Right. So my ignorance was actually a huge part of my success because I really thought I didn't even think houses were open in the morning. Like I didn't know you could show houses in the morning. Like you had to prospect in the morning. So like I was so scheduled and I joined a team and that's what I did. And so I could convert everything. I
Yeah.
worked really hard on scripts. I woke up, I role played. I mean, I did my miracle morning, I role played, um, I prospected, I tracked my contacts, I tracked my appointments, I did buyer consultations. In fact, out of those 37 homes, all of them had signed a buyer agency agreement. That's another
Pretty good
thing that not
numbers. Pretty good
everybody
numbers.
does, right? So I had done the buyer consultation, and maybe not all of them. I think maybe there was 1 or 2 that bought at the open house, that was that.
Yeah, Mary. Only one or two. Terrible.
I
Terrible
know,
numbers.
but they probably bought the house they met me at, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
other
yeah,
than that, like, they were pre-approved, they had done
yeah.
a needs analysis or buyer consultation,
Yeah.
they had signed that buyer agency agreement, and they were ready to buy right now. I was really strict. Um,
Apparently, I love it.
I didn't know that you couldn't be, so I will just say that that's the tip that I would do is really understand your time and who you're gonna spend your time with.
Yeah. That's really tough as a new agent as well, right? Like I feel like shady investors and like weird buyers have like a radar for brand new agents, right?
Mhm.
And like I always try to tell my team this because they're like, "Oh, I got this hot new lead," and they like start telling me about it, and I'm like, "I think this is a scam," you know.
Right.
So it's like, well, you've got to test them a little bit and ask these questions and like dig deeper and do a consult, and if they're not willing to do that, like, is this really, more someone that you want to be working with or not. But
Yeah, and the
um
luck I think I had was also that I needed it to work. I had done enough training in the beginning that I thought that I mean, not that I had learned a framework for how to do
yeah.
it, but I also had babies at home.
Yeah.
I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. So
Yeah.
I really was I had to be very strategic with my time. I
For
couldn't
sure.
waste it.
Okay, so you mentioned like obviously the morning
I just
routine.
heard the bell ring out there. That means someone to set an appointment.
Hell yeah. So okay.
Sorry,
Morning
distraction.
routine and like just getting into a specific kind of flow and stuff like that. And you also mentioned finding a team, right?
Mhm,
And so in finding a team, like in similar in finding a brokerage, like as a brand new agent, everyone is kind of selling you. They're like, we're the best, we have the best training, we have mentors, we do this, we do that, like we have low fees or we have this or we have whatever, right? And like everyone makes their brokerage seem like it's just like the best. And teams do it too. How
mhm.
would you recommend or what would you recommend people do to really test like that culture or test that team or like because it's not every team's for everyone, right? Like someone's could interview with you and me, and like they may like both of us, they may not, but like they would go with
Mhm.
one or the other, right? Like how can you find the right team for you? Like what's
I think the first step is really spending a little time with yourself and figuring out what it is that you're looking for and what you're willing to commit to. So, I think when you really understand what is your vision for the perfect life? What
yeah,
will it look like a year from now, 2 years, 3 years from now? And that sounds so big, especially as a new agent, because
yeah,
real estate is like, I mean, they don't even know splits and commission and online leads and database. All of that is like speaking another language in the beginning. I remember one of my first meetings and them talking to me about farming and like sitting there the entire time thinking they were talking about like watering plants. Like I didn't know what the hell that
same.
meant.
I'm like I don't really want to do farms. I don't.
I was like sitting there like, yeah, like I don't want to sell farms. We don't even have that many farms. Like so like but understanding like what it is that you're looking for, right? So when I started to interview teams, and I did interview them. Well, the
Yeah,
lucky thing was, which I keep saying lucky, but I guess it really wasn't all luck. I was there, I was in there early and I was spending a lot of time there. And I was willing to pick up the phone because I was told that's what I was supposed to do. So
yeah,
the team started seeking me out. Right? They see some new agent they had never seen before and she's in there first and she's standing up and she's making phone calls and people were giving me all their garbage rental leads and I was calling them all and
yeah,
converting them. So that was like I started to have teams reach out to me and then
yeah.
I just started interviewing them. So it just depends on what you're looking for. The team that I chose showed me a leadership path.
Okay.
And I guess that was attractive to me. And it was
Yeah.
like, you're
What
going to
that
have
was.
opportunities. We have all the back end support. And a lot of teams are not organized. They're just a bunch
Yeah,
of people. They're a bunch of salespeople who kind of got together and now they're like calling themselves a team, but they never made a plan around it.
for sure.
So that was kind of how it happened. This team happened to have somewhat of an organization. They were coached
Yeah,
and they're still it was two partners. They're separated now, but they're two still top agents.
yeah.
So they were in alignment with me.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think that's difficult because I feel like every new agent, like the goal is like, well, I want to make six figures. Like I want to make $100,000 and
Yes.
I want to sell houses. And like, it's like really breaking down and kind of digging in deeper on that. Like, of like, well, does that cover your bills? How much money do you have saved? Like, what would you do with that money? And like really figuring out like kind of what their priorities and stuff like that are.
And then
Um,
helping them understand that it doesn't happen right away. Because they all say it's funny because Jeremiah and I just talked about this like the other day. And I was like, everyone always says 100,000.
yeah.
That's the number. That was the number that I said.
Oh
And
yeah.
I was embarrassed to say it. And I hit it. And it wasn't even a full year.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I hit that on a team split, right? Paying my own cap still with Keller Williams, paying
Yeah.
my monthly fee. So the other thing I would tell agents not to get wrapped up in is the split.
Yeah.
Like, what is the value? What's the net going to be to you? And what value are they adding to you? I still feel that way. So, but yeah. And also, it's also a large process to start selling. So the other thing I always tell about my first year was I sold 4 in my first 6 months. So I got
Mhm.
licensed in January. In fact, it was 8 years yesterday. I got my
Congratulations.
license
Happy
actually,
anniversary.
thank you, in January. That first 6 months, I sold 4 houses, and the second 6 months, I sold 33. Right? So
Just
that
like
first 6
trickle,
months
trickle,
was all
trickle, boom.
pipeline. It was
Yeah.
just pipeline, right? It was like follow-up pipeline. Like, that's kind of what it looked like.
Have you seen that like cartoon meme of like the guy that's like, going after the diamond or whatever, like in the mine and like he turns around, but then the other guy keeps chipping away and like then he hits the jackpot? And that's like
Yes.
truly how I feel real estate is. And that's where it's like, we always ask people kind of about their finances, right? And like, hey, do you have 3 to 6 months of money saved?
Mhm.
Right, in order to pay your bills, and what does that look like? And like I don't need to see your bank account number, but like I just need to make sure that that like even if you put something under contract today, it's not closing tomorrow.
Right.
So it's definitely a long game in that setting up your pipeline and talking to your people and doing open houses and making your calls, all happens in that first couple months.
And that's the hard part with real estate too, is that there is no instant gratification. It's
Yeah.
all building the pipeline because then also once you get those houses under contract, like, and you start to have things close, like you still need to eat 3 months from now. So you have to
Yeah.
you have to keep it never ends. It's a never
Yeah.
ending cycle. You can't take your foot off the gas. Um, and that's a learned skill. And you don't really feel it, I don't think, until you're really in it.
Well, and that's like the roller coaster of real estate, right? So what do you do to help your team agents avoid that, right? Because like you'll have, I know we see it, right? Like Mary has a great month, she puts 5 under contract, and then the next month you've got nothing because you were so focused on the 5 under contract, and stopped making calls and marketing and prospecting. So
Mhm.
what are some like tactical things that y'all, kind of make sure your team does, or that you like always mentally prepare for to ensure that you have like at least a little bit more steady income?
Well, we talk about it constantly, but we're also we're very systematized, and also we only spend our time in our strength zone. So
Okay.
once that person went under contract, that's going to go to my admin team.
Okay.
If you have 5 pending, they're not really taking any of your time. You're
Yeah.
checking in on them, but you shouldn't be involved in the transaction. In fact, if you are too involved in the transaction, it messes up our processes. So we kind of have
Yeah.
that conversation a lot, where it's the second you get your hottest prospect under contract, you just lost your hottest prospect. So you
Yep.
better have another one. And it's just this constant talk. We also really track contacts,
Okay.
appointments set,
Yep.
calls made. That's what we talk about the most, because I mean, I can't help it if your 5 pending all fall apart, right?
Yeah.
That's not in our control, but I can control who you're talking to and the people that you're running through the pipeline all the time.
For sure. Well, and I think that, with a strong admin team, that is the case, right? Like, you're just getting in the way, right? When
Mhm.
you're trying to go over the deal or trying to do things,
Yeah, we
and
have
they're
mistakes, and
definitely.
we talk about those
Yeah.
mistakes a lot. Like, we just had one happen where they gave information that was the incorrect information
Yeah.
for, like, the deposit check, right? Your escrow check. They told them to make it out to the title company that we
Yeah.
always use. Well, we
That's
weren't at
not.
that part yet.
Yeah.
It was the wrong title. It was not the right thing to do. Don't have that conversation.
Yeah.
And that's the other that's another script that you have to learn, which is much easier with a new agent than, let's say, an experienced agent that comes to the team.
Yeah.
So it's just having the processes in place, and being really strict on following them.
Well, that's, I think, just such a work in progress too. I mean, because like you've had your team now for a while, and like
Mhm.
I know that for us it was like just figuring out what those processes were, who was taking what when, and ensuring that we're continuing to reevaluate to make sure that it's the right process, right? Because sometimes things change, or sometimes things are more efficient done other ways. So
Or you make a mistake and you're like, "Shoot, that wasn't in the checklist."
yeah,
And
yeah,
then it
for
gets
sure.
added to the checklist,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of our things that are in our checklist is because we made a mistake somewhere along the way.
That formerly like 5-step checklist is now like 553 steps. You're like, yeah, it's because we've done a lot of deals.
Yeah, right. You're like, "Whoops, should have put that in there."
Yeah. So at what point did Brian come work with you?
So I joined a team first. I was a buyer's agent,
Yeah.
and I wasn't allowed to take listings. So I did
Okay.
that for my first year and a half. I hadn't taken a
Yep.
listing because I had to pass all of them.
Yeah.
So then after that, and the growth trajectory that they had spoken about, you know, I think that people, when they sit down and talk to you, they mean what they say, but it doesn't always come to fruition. Like,
Yeah.
you don't always know how to make that work. So I left the first team. I joined another team. That was 6 months. That was not the right move. Actually, at that team, I was supposed to be like a recruiter plus an agent. I was like a direct expansion director,
Yeah.
long story short. So then after that second team, I realized that I knew what I wanted it to look like, and I would have stayed on a team forever if I found one that looked the way I wanted it to look, maybe,
Yeah.
but I really just wanted to control a lot more of it. So it was like middle of 2018. Let's
That's
be real.
one of the least surprising things that you could say of like, "Oh, I couldn't find a team because I just wanted more control." Like that's anyways,
It's
continue.
a team
Sorry.
leader type thing, but I knew that how I wanted it to look, and I did not have the decision-making authority to make
Yeah.
it look that way. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I finally then had to go start my own team. And it
Okay.
had nothing to do with my own name, it had nothing to do with my own branding. It really didn't. And I always think there's teams are made for different reasons. So one, it's ego, and those teams are usually like a team of 20 that are selling 20 houses a year, or it's made out of necessity or just out of the strength of wanting to be a leader.
Yeah.
I don't hold anything back. It just comes out. So
Well, that's where when you're like, "Oh, I couldn't find a team that was exactly what I wanted." I'm like, "Well, duh," because, like, you're, like, such a driver personality. For anyone that doesn't know Mary, like, I'm sure in the, 20 minutes you've been listening to this podcast, you've kinda seen that a little bit. So yeah, no, that
I
just
know I didn't even answer
makes
your
me
question
chuckle.
yet, right? Like
It's
I'm like, I'm
fine.
down there.
Just continue on.
So,
It's your
right. So
show
in
today, Mary, so you just
mid 2018, I'm at this point selling 70 homes a year.
yeah.
Personally, I'm mostly all listings at this point because
Okay.
what I realized was I could be a lot more efficient with
Oh, yeah.
listings. And most of my business was coming from for sale by owners and expireds.
Okay.
Expireds first. I loved expireds. All of a sudden, though, the market got too good and every expired was either crazy or just unmotivated.
Yeah, for
So I
sure.
had to switch over to for sale by owners. So that was me. I would wake up, get on the phone, call for expireds and FISBOs. Now I'm running my own team. Well, you know what? Just because you're a great agent doesn't make you a team leader. That's a whole nother skill. And when I was running a million miles an hour, selling a ton of homes, and I realized I had never written my own contract. I had never put a listing in the MLS. I had never done that. Like I always
Yeah.
had an admin team, whether they were good or bad, I always
It
had
just
one.
had you had that resource, you had
I
that
had
help.
that resource. So now I'm like, holy crap, like I know how to do. Now I can't stop running because I need to keep running, but now I'm hiring admin.
Yeah.
So I went through that first year of the Murphy Group. I went through 4 admin that year. And it was really just and they call it seagull leadership. You hire someone and then you dump a whole bunch of stuff on them and then you don't stay
Yeah.
around long enough to train them. And I was still paying for things like the perfect real estate assistant. Hey, go watch this, learn how to be an
Yeah.
assistant. I had paid for a consulting company to help me hire, and I still didn't get the right fit, but it was just really, really hard. So getting to Brian, now it's 2019. I had gone through 4 assistants. I had 3 buyer's agents, and I was still doing the buyer agent thing because that's what they tell you in the red book. If you read Millionaire Real Estate Agent, that's the way it's supposed to look. I knew I was generating so many buyer leads because I could take so many listings.
Yeah.
So out of
Of course.
70 houses,
Yeah.
60 of them were listings.
Yeah.
The only buyers that I sold, I actually would say this out loud. The only way I'm working with a buyer is if when they call me, they already picked out the house.
Okay.
At that point, that's where I was because I
Yeah.
was so inundated with listings that you have to learn to say no to things. So basically now it's 2019. My husband and I are in Jamaica and I can't leave my business. I finally have a new admin at the time. It was one of my buyer's agents. She was there with me while I made this big mess. And one day I actually said to her, she's still with me now. This is the worst day of my life. I've got to put 2 listings in the MLS. I've got to do a contract. I got to prep for a listing. And she was like, I want to do all of that. And I never want to do an open house again. I'm like, well, that's beautiful. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's how she came on. Now we're in Jamaica. And I said to my husband, you know how, like, I'll say I want to go on vacation or I want to do something. And I say that. And then all of a sudden that happens. And I don't even know what airline we're flying on.
Yeah.
Like, I need that to happen in my business. And I had read Rocket Fuel. If you haven't read that book, it talks about the visionary and the integrator. And within reading that book, that was me and my husband.
Okay.
I'm ultimate big picture visionary. I don't know how to put all the details in place.
Yeah.
So that first year and a half of me building the team was a hot mess. That looked like me apologizing all the time. That looked like me paying inspectors to squeeze me in because I never got it done. That looked like me apologizing to the title company for not putting the order in.
Yeah.
Because I was just such a mess. So he joined me in the end of 2019.
Okay. And so what did he do before, right? Like in his previous life and career, what was his like industry or
So he was in insurance.
Okay.
He had like managed an insurance company. He left for a little bit too. When I finished real estate school, he then decided to go out and be an entrepreneur himself. And he opened an insurance agency.
Okay.
And that didn't work. Us both being entrepreneurs and paying for our own insurance and all of that at once didn't work. So he went back into the corporate world. Okay. So he was in the corporate world, working for Allstate Insurance, managing a claims department, and he wasn't happy at all.
Yeah.
And I wasn't either because it was really hard for us to balance it. So that's what he was doing.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
Mhm.
Um, so what advice looking back on it now, right? And like, 19, 20, 21, like 4 or 5 years later, right? Like looking back on it now of like going to hire, right? Because um I think that a lot of people in starting a team have a similar situation to what you just said, right? Like they're doing so much business, they don't know which way is up anymore. Like they need someone to help take stuff off their plate, but they don't even know what to take off their plate, right? And like
Mhm.
it's just like a little bit of chaos. And so what advice would you give to someone if they were looking to hire, like in either in finding the right person, in what they should delegate, in like just something that may help them make that first hire?
So I really think your first hire, which we all will hear a million times over, is you need an admin. And I would say it's okay if you do like a per transaction TC.
Yeah.
Find a TC company just to get that paperwork off your plate and then trust them, have an expectations meeting with them, but then you have to get out of it.
Yeah,
Because too many hands in the pot is really what does mess everything up.
for
So
sure.
you have to, if you're going to delegate, you have to be willing to delegate. And we joked a bit, and I am a very driver personality. I'm an amazing delegator. Like I'm willing to like give things away as long as I know that I don't affect the outcome.
Yeah.
I don't affect the outcome if I'm checking the mortgage commitment. It has to get checked, but I don't have to do it. So I would say that first, get a strong process around your your admin. Um, I would also do a VA. I wouldn't spend a ton of money you don't have, is what I wouldn't do. The second
Yeah.
thing I wouldn't do is hire an agent. It's so easy to go get a bunch of agents because they
Yeah.
don't cost you any fixed expense. What
Costs you
they
a lot of
cost you
time
is your
though.
time.
Yeah.
And that's the most, I don't think agents understand. Like our dollar per hour time is so high.
Yeah,
And
for
I
sure.
think I understood that. I knew that my most important time was when I was on the phone finding the listing appointment and when I was on that listing appointment. And everything outside of that didn't need to be me.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so I don't know if that's a succinct answer. So my first answer is you should be spending all of your time on income generating activities. So everything that's not income generating is what you leverage. And that's not agents, not yet.
Yeah.
And I told you how I didn't work buyers. And it wasn't because I didn't like buyers, it's because I knew that I couldn't do both. And my dollar per hour was better spent on listings.
For
So I
sure.
let the buyers go. I referred them out to agents on my team or on in the
In
office.
the office, yeah.
Yeah, like that's how I had to do it. I never did an open house. If I did an open house, it was only because I didn't hit my goals. In fact, it was a joke in
You're,
my
like,
office.
punishing yourself
It was a
to
punishment.
get more
So
business.
15th of the month protocol. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but if you're not halfway through your goals on the 15th of the month, like you have to do something more. So
Yeah,
for me, it was do an open house. So if you saw me stomping through the office with all these open house signs on the 15th of the month, you would know.
yeah,
And I didn't do that often because I really didn't want to work Sun. It wasn't that I didn't like open houses. I love them. I love face to face, but I didn't want to work
yeah,
Sundays.
yeah.
So that was that.
That's
So I don't know if I even answered your question,
No, you
but
did,
my
you did.
question answer admin first.
Yeah,
Admin first. You're spending all your time on income generating activities. Now it's bringing in too much business that you can handle personally. Then you get agents.
well, and I think part of that also is getting organized, right? And that's where, like, the admin can help you to like, you're gonna have to give them systems and processes, you're gonna have to give them, "This is how we do things," or they're gonna help you to create that, right? And then at that point, when you're bringing on agents, you're bringing them into something that actually provides value.
That's
And
right.
too often, I mean, that's our first hire was an agent, right? And the quarter that we hired her was September of 2018, right? And so that last quarter of 2018 was my worst financial quarter ever in real estate, ever. Like in all of my quarters, even before when I was licensed on my own, just because like it was so much time and energy put into that instead of prospecting and doing the things that make me money. Um, but we found our
Same
way.
experience.
We
Yeah, same
found our
experience.
way.
The end of 2019, when I was going through that mess of hiring all these admin, bringing on agents, I realized that it was the exact same thing. I had made less money in that fourth quarter.
Yeah.
I was spending all this time mentoring agents who were selling nothing, and it was taking all of my time away. And that's what you
Yeah.
really have to be cognizant of because there's no a solo agent has the highest percentage of their income, right? Like
Oh,
you're
for
like
sure.
at like a 70% profitability.
Yeah.
When you get to build a team, like you just watch your profitability go down. So you
Yeah.
have to increase the amount of commission coming in order for it to make sense. Otherwise, you build a team and you just lost money.
Yeah. And that's the thing I think too that people don't realize as they're building a team. You need to know what your cost per transaction is, right? So Mary was saying like, most of your business came from listings, right? So it's like at that point, I'm sure you had maybe a decent idea of what they cost, right? But then also like how much time and what are you leveraging out for buyers and what's the cost for a buyer transaction? Because like, yeah, you're gonna have a transaction coordinator, you're gonna have other things. So like those all also cost money. So just figuring that out to make sure you're profitable
Mhm.
from the beginning, as opposed to then having to go back to your agents, 6 months or 12 months down the road to be like, hey, we've got to change splits because I'm not making any money. So
And also, don't do it by yourself. Like, don't recreate the wheel. I sit down with team leaders sometimes and they tell me things like their splits and their expenses. And it
yeah,
was actually last week that I was sitting with one and he pays for their real estate school and their MLS and all before the agents even on his team, he's in for $2,000. And then his splits are so high. And he's like, I'm just a giver. I'm like, right, but like you have to make money. Like this is
yeah,
you can't it doesn't run this way. And then when you find out later, and now all of a sudden you have to go back to them and be like, hey, that 90-10 that we're on with me
yeah.
spending 5 grand a month on Zillow isn't working. So
Well, I think a lot of times people that are like that came from a team, right? And they may not like the more traditional team splits, or they may like, they left because they had a personality. They were like, I want to do this on my own, or I want to build this, or I want whatever vision I want. And like, they're like, I hated the split there. So I want to give more. But it's like, they didn't realize all of the things that were on, the team side of the 50%, right?
mhm,
Um, and I think that's something that like, we interview a lot of people that want to join the team. And for some, right, splits are a big hang up. And I'm like, we have agents that are making 100 or 200K a year, right?
mhm.
Like, could they make that on their own? Yeah, maybe they could, or more, right? Or double that. But these are all the things that you have to look at. So, like, do you want, you know, your number on your 1099, or do you want a, 100% split? Like, you've got to figure
That's
out what's more important to you.
that's so valuable. And I hear people all the time talk about like their flat fee brokerage or whatever it is that
Yeah.
they want to talk about or their team with the high splits. It's all about the value. And so we're very transparent with our team.
Yeah,
We're very transparent and the leads are earned. The referrals are earned as
for
well, but
sure.
we're very transparent on what it costs. So yes, you're on a 50-50 split, but let's break down your 50 and my 50,
Yeah.
right? And talk about who acts like you have no expenses.
Yeah.
You pretty much have to keep your license active, right? And then everything else
Yeah,
comes out of us and you wouldn't have where did those opportunities come from?
for sure.
Yeah, you were on a 50-50 split. And, I recently had an agent sit down with a broker who ran the numbers and was like, if you weren't on her team, you're giving away your hard earned money. This is what it would have looked like.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, well, did you tell him where all those opportunities came from?
Yeah.
Right? Would you have had them? So it's a very hard conversation, but also I want to go back for a minute and talk about how I left the teams in order to create my own.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
it sounded like it was my own way. It wasn't. You know why I left was because I spent so much time studying how the top teams ran. Like I was obsessed with it.
Yeah.
And you'll realize that most teams don't run the way those top teams run. They're very, very different. So I realized that.
So what would you say, was like a differentiating factor, or what was like, when you were realizing that where you were, or where like some of the other places you were interviewing, you were like, "God, this just isn't the right fit. This isn't what I want." Like, what was like one of those key things, or like was it a list of things, or was there like a couple things that you could pinpoint that you were like, "No, this is what I want." Does that make sense?
I guess, I mean, I was really blessed. So I wouldn't say anything negative about my experiences. I think I'd hit a ceiling. One of the things was, I think as you start to increase your leadership lead, you can actually outgrow your leaders. So I think that's kind of what it was that I was spending so much time. And I hired my first coach my first year in, I was on a team.
Yeah.
And so I was being coached, I was going to events, I was reading. I mean, I don't even know how many books I read my first couple of years. Even now, if you
Yeah.
can see my shelf, like
I know, it's all full. I see
I
some
don't
good ones
I
over
read
there.
a ton. So I think that what I realized was that there was just a better way to do it. I also my first team I left, I didn't agree with being only a buyer's agent.
Yeah.
I had no opportunity to ever grow past that.
Yeah.
I also think that certain teams, if you join them, as you do increase your leadership lid, and that's from the 5 levels of leadership, John Maxwell. So that's
Okay.
where, so John Maxwell, as you increase that, you start to surpass your leader and they don't always like it. So you actually start to have this like
Like, yeah.
disconnect.
Yeah, or
And
friction, yeah.
so if there was one thing, I would say there wasn't one thing, but I knew how I wanted it to look and I knew how it should look for agents.
Yeah,
And for me now, it's all with being in your strength zone. And
for
not
sure.
everyone's going to be the right fit for my team. They're not all going to like it. They're not going to love the accountability. In
Yeah.
fact, I deal with that all the time. But they're out there ringing bells
Accountability
and
is
looking jobs
love.
right now.
Um, so speaking of all of the books behind you, what's a book or 3, I don't have to, pigeonhole you into one, but, like, what's a book or a few books that you would recommend every agent read?
So as a brand new agent, I always would say read these two. It's Fanatical Prospecting, and that's not just phone prospecting. If you're listening to this and you're like, hell no, I'm never calling a FISBO, you don't have to.
Yeah.
But that's just the mindset around prospecting and building your pipeline and how you have to like continuously build your pipeline. So that's the number one book that I think every agent should read. I also really love Go for No. I think that
Okay.
one of the hardest thing as a new agent is dealing with the rejection that we face every
Yeah.
day and understanding one, they're not rejecting us, right? But two, understanding that each time you get rejected, you're getting close to someone who's going to want your help.
Mhm.
So those are the two that I would definitely say to read. I'm trying to think if you could read Mindset by Carol Dweck. That's another one that I
Yeah.
really love. It's just strengthening that muscle.
Yeah.
Those are the 3. Read those 3. And then
I
come
like
back
it.
to me because I can give you 2 million more. I have a hard time. I'm gonna hang up and be like, "Those aren't the 3, there's another one." Um,
Yeah, no, I mean, those are all good. I've read Fanatical Prospecting, but I haven't read the other 2. Carol Dweck's Mindset one's been on my list for a while. It's just hard. Like, I recently had a ton of books over here, but we're getting ready to move what was my home office into the office and a whole bunch of stuff. So I just packed up all my stuff. But yeah, those are on my
and
list for
Audible
sure.
is great. Certain books
Oh
are
yeah.
great on Audible. Fanatical Prospecting is fantastic on Audible.
Yeah.
Um, some of them are not. So actually, I tend to say too, if it's not being read by the author or it's an older book, like
Yeah.
don't listen to Think and Grow Rich on Audible. Like you'll crash your car while you're driving because it's so boring on Audible. But you just should be filling your brain with stuff. If it's podcasts, whatever.
Yeah. One that I found was hard to listen to on Audible and actually had to buy the book was Who, Not How. Because I
Agreed.
listen to them slightly faster, like, I do, like, 1.25 or 1.5 depending on the author,
Mhm.
and it was just like, and it, like, I felt like I was listening to, like, a Dr. Seuss, like, Cat in the Hat, like, hop on pop, like, type thing. Because there was just, like, who, not how are both very, like, short, similarly sounding words.
Mhm.
So yeah, I would agree with you on that. There are some that are not good Audible books.
I would also say not to rush to read. I feel like a lot of times I saw someone post the other day, like, read 100 books last year. I'm like, did you retain 100 books? Like, so for me, retention is very important. And also, once I get the message, I'm okay not finishing the book. I really am. Like, if I get the message and now I'm realizing that it's just repetitive, and now I might go to the end, read it, and I'm like, all right, got it. That was great. I don't need to read the rest of it. So it's okay. One more though, Katie, if you haven't read this, you have to read it. It's called The Gap and the Gain by Dan Sullivan.
Yeah.
Have you read that one?
I have it. I know that I have it, but I'm not sure if it's definitely been cracked, but I don't know if I've finished it.
Oh,
But
that
I
one,
haven't.
I really love that one,
Yeah.
especially if you're a high performer or you're hard on yourself. If you're
Yeah.
someone who sets big goals and is always kind of hard on yourself, which I am that way, that book was really powerful for me.
I feel like real estate's a tough comparison world, right? Because I think that, like, in real estate, um you do how many ever sales, or you sell how many ever millions of dollars or whatever, and it's like, all right, so we're just going to double it for next year. We're just going to increase it by 50% or whatever it is. It's like the bar is always continually moving. And so one of the things that we did this year, especially in, like, we're having a kid and, like, whatever, was like financially, what do we want, right? And,
Mhm,
like, what does that look like, and what does the team look like to achieve that, right? And then what are our other financial goals and other aspects of our life? Because, like, when you're just like, oh, we want to gross 5 million commissions, it's like, well, what does that even mean? Like, so, like, we
mhm,
really took the time to think about it, to be like, we don't need to be a team of 50 agents, and we don't need to do this, and we don't need to do that. Like, we just see everyone else doing that on all of these coaching programs and Facebook groups and stuff. So my advice out there, if you're listening to this, is like, you know pick your goals and stick to your goals, not like what you think your goals should be because of everyone else. It's just my two
Yeah, I mean,
cents.
comparison is the thief of joy, and I
Yeah.
really believe that, and so don't compare yourself to other people. I think you really do have to figure out what it is that's important to you and why. In
Yeah.
fact, on Friday, we did, our quarterly team meeting, which is called Go to the Board. It's a
Okay.
John Sheplack framework, and what each agent does is they go up and they say that what the goal of number of houses they wanna hit is.
Okay.
It's not about the number of houses. Of course, they have to break into the number of houses based on the income,
Yeah.
but the power of that meeting is, what will it mean if you hit that?
Yeah.
What will that do for your life? What will your life look like? And what will it look like if you don't? And so it's really getting to that, like, I wanna have 5,000,000 GCI. What does that mean?
Yeah.
If you spend 400 and like $4,999,000 to hit 5,000,000, like, you hit the goal and
But
you're good.
like, yeah.
And we see that with teams,
I was
believe it
say,
or not.
which is a lot of teams out there.
It really is, like, they're just not profitable,
Yeah.
so it really has to be, you know, you have to have, I hate to say the why around it because I actually really hate that question, and I don't know if we have time, but I'm gonna tell you why really quick. I have to do it. When I first got into real estate, the team leader at the time asked me, "What's your why? Why?" And I was probably 6 months in, and I remember being like, like, "Why do you wanna sell so many houses? Why do you wanna hit 100,000?" I'm like, I know I can do it. I know I can be the
Yeah.
best at this. I wanna be so good at it that I'm teaching others to do it. I wanna speak on stages. And I had all these visions. And he looked at me and was like, "Don't you have kids?" And I was like, "Yeah. Oh, yeah, my kids, they're my why." And so after that, whenever anyone would say, "What's your why?" Like, I was embarrassed. I was like, "Oh my god, I just sounded like a total egomaniac. I was supposed to say my kids." And so then for years after that, when anyone would ever say, "Mary, what's your why?" I would say my children and my family. And it didn't take till later that I realized I answered correctly the first time. My kids were always gonna eat. They were always gonna be fed. They were always gonna be taken care of. They weren't the reason why I had to get this to this level of success. That reason I told him was. So now I understand that question more, but I don't like
Yeah.
that question because everyone's just like, "My kids." I'm like, "Right, but like, do you need to sell 100 houses to feed your kids?"
Well, I mean, and I think that it's one of those things, I feel similarly, because you sit down in, like, these groups at, like, say, like, an office meeting or, like, a coaching program thing, and it's like, they put on the inspirational music and everyone's writing down how much they love their family and whatever, but it's like, I feel like all of it's also kind of a given, right? In the,
Mhm.
like, yeah, I'm here to, like, be able to provide a better future for my children and to provide a good life for me and my spouse and, like, blah, 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 whatever. And I think that sometimes people feel like, yeah, like, maybe it's egotistical or maybe it's whatever, but, like, you should also have your personal goals of the things that you want to reach, right?
Right.
And I think a lot of people are just afraid to say that because it's like the touchy-feely answer is, like, "Oh, I just wanna, like, create a future for, whatever." So, I don't
Right.
know.
Like,
I would agree with you on that.
yeah, I just, like,
Yeah.
will never forget that meeting because I was kinda like, "Oh my gosh, that's so embarrassing." But, yeah, I just think that you really have to understand. So when you set a goal, you have to know what it will look like if you hit it.
Yeah.
And when you have that personal connection to it, like I had, one of my team members, his wife is working 60 hours a week and they have 2 babies and
Yeah.
he's home most of the time. She wants to be home and he hates it.
Yeah.
So if he hits his goals, she can go part-time and he could be the breadwinner again, which is what he
Yeah.
wants.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's a huge why. So now I can hold him to accountable to that.
And that's really all that it comes down to, right? Is that, like, what's your life going to look like if you do this, right? And
Mhm.
is this if this is truly what you want when you're not doing the things that you should be doing, right? That where that accountability can come in, right? So whether it's speaking on stage and selling 100 homes because you can do it, or providing for your family, or your wife being able to stop working, or whatever it is, like it just, that's your personal thing, and I mean, you know, yeah,
It's just like a seller or buyer, right? So, like, when we're working with buyers and sellers, we gotta know why. Like,
yeah,
to a buyer, why do you wanna buy by August? Well, because by
yeah,
August, if I don't, I have to re-sign my lease, right? So in July, when they're not making decisions or they're about to blow up a whole transaction because of a,
yeah.
cracked siding or
Receptacle
something,
cover.
we can then go back to them and say, "Okay, great. So then are we then gonna be okay with re-signing the lease?"
Yeah, for sure.
So that's the same way with I feel with agents. So it's just understanding why people do something because what is it? They say the heart chooses and the mind justifies. So you have to know why, and then you help them figure it out.
For sure. Okay. I'm gonna hit you with one last question.
Okay.
If it was your last meal on earth, what would you eat?
My last meal on earth, what would I eat? I'm a good old Italian girl. I'm eating spaghetti with a side of French fries.
Oh,
Just give me all the
alright.
carbs.
Alright. That's a interesting side dish to a
You know,
plate
I
of
wouldn't
pasta.
typically eat them together, but this is the last meal, right? So
Yeah.
I'm spaghetti and French fries.
Okay. Is that a homemade spaghetti or like a family recipe, or is that a like there's a specific restaurant you go to in Jersey?
That would be homemade. That would be my
Yeah.
mom.
Okay.
Yeah,
Alright.
that's it.
Perfect.
What are you eating? I need to know now.
Probably steak and sushi.
Steak and soup. That's actually more weird than spaghetti and French fries.
Well, those are my 2 favorite, like, things, which has been really terrible being pregnant because like, you can't eat, like, raw fish or, undercooked meat, and, so it's been a rough couple months
So
here,
now you're eating
so
like California rolls and like well done steak.
yeah, I've had a couple steaks and then I basically about 5 months, 5.5 months into my pregnancy was just like, "I'm not eating steak again." Like, unless it's in, like, a stir fry or something where it has a bunch of stuff on it, but, like, you know how you go to a steakhouse and you get, like, a really good steak, all it has is salt and pepper on it, and, like, that's
Yes.
perfect? Well, it's not perfect when it's, like, well done. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I've just basically made the decision that, like, I'll go and eat, like, salmon or chicken or whatever, and reconvene on the steak post-child, so,
It's awesome. This was
if
so fun.
thank you so much for joining. Okay, so you work in South Jersey, right? Like, across from Philly area?
Yes, I work Southern New Jersey, it's right by Philly, it's Cherry Hill and,
Okay.
like, Burlington, Camden counties is where I
Yeah.
am.
Okay, awesome. So if someone were trying to get in touch with you or find you on social media, where's the best place for them to go?
Instagram or Facebook, you can find me on either one.
Alright,
Um,
perfect.
awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you, and I will talk to you soon.
Awesome.